Hey guys, what is up? Welcome to episode number 2 in our Creating a Game in Java series. Um, this is the second time I've gone through recording this. The first time I bumbled, just it was awful. You can see it's really late. My grammar was getting absolutely terrible, but I did want to show you. There it comes again. There it goes again. Oh my goodness. That I did start up our repository. If you go into branches, I'm going to have this by episodes. You can click on the source, and if you look, you can go, navigate through all the source and stuff like that. And you can actually look at my source code, and I will update this as I go. I don't know when I'll get around to uploading episode 2, but it'll happen at some point. That I can promise you. But let's actually go ahead and dive headfirst into our code here and get going. If you go to your desktop source and go to main, I changed a couple things. I've pretty much undone everything I did from the first time I recorded this except for this. For the width, I changed it to 1080. For the height, I changed it to 720. So we're going to have a nice widescreen, it's basically 720p game. If your display is smaller than that or something, feel free to adjust those to your needs. Pardon me. But just keep that in mind as you're, creating your images and assets and stuff like that. The other thing, I changed the title. I added a space here, and I'm going to change something else. I'm going to put a space here, and I'm going to say plus Angry Masons dot version, and it's going to give us an error because that variable doesn't exist yet. But if we go to our Angry Masons thing and we go up here and we create a public static final string called version and set that equal to 0.0.0.01 pre-alpha. That way everyone knows that this is not a finished product. Otherwise, they're going to be in for a rude awakening. And you can see that it now recognizes it because this, what did I just do? Whoops, I hit Control D, which deletes an entire line, in case you didn't know that. One of the fancy things about Eclipse, there are lots of keyboard shortcuts. But there's your title, and that will, pretty nice, pretty fancy. Now if we go back over here, this is where we're going to start changing stuff. I want you to take this line of code right here, not the line, but that section. I want to change that to extends game. And we need to import game, and we can do that by pressing Control-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O, whether you're on Windows or on a Mac. And we now have all these different methods. Well, we have them still. And we need to go through them. And we need to do on everything except for create. We need to call the super methods. Whoops. And basically, because this extends game, if we look at the game class by hitting Control and clicking on it, we can look at the source code through here. We can see that it actually calls a screen and calls each individual thing for that screen. So this manages screens for us. And so what we need to do is we need to tell it to call the screen's hide method or the screen's pause method or the screen's resume. Basically, it handles everything like that for us. And it's awesome. So we need to, when we call super.dispose, it actually goes into game and calls dispose here, and it says if the screen doesn't equal null, then it actually calls this method right here, screen.hide. And if you look, there's a private screen, and we can set the screen should we so choose. And we will have to do that at some point. But for now, let's just do super.render. And for resize, let's do super.resize. And width height, super.pause. And last but not least, super.resume. And under create, when you start up a game, what is the first thing you see? If you answer anything other than splash screen, I'm not sure what games you're playing. But that's what we're actually going to be making today, is the splash screen. And it will give us a very, very good heads up as to how to render graphics to the screen using the LibGDX engine and with OpenGL. The thing you have to be wary of, if you go into main.java, you see that we have the config use GL 2.0. It's GL20 stands for GL 2.0 to false. This means we have certain constraints. One of those constraints, if I bring up my calculator here, is that if all of our image assets have to be a power of 2, so they need to be the width and the height have to be a power of 2, whether that be 4 by 8 or 8 by 8 or 16 by 32 or 32 by 32 or 32 by 16. You get the idea, but it all has to be a power of 2, so 2 to the x power. If it's not, you're going to get an error when you try to load it. If you want to not have that complication, set this to true. It won't complicate your life anymore. However, when you go from GL 1.0 to 2.0, you leave out certain older devices from playing your game. So it's something you may or may not want to consider. Pretty much at this point, they're devices that no one uses anyway, but it makes your life a whole lot easier and just kind of decomplicates a lot of things if you just leave it where it is. I used to always just change it to true and make images how I needed, and it's all right for starting, but it's not what we necessarily need. The other thing I actually wanted to change, I completely forgot, but make another public static final string, call it log, and set it equal to angry masons. So that'll work for now as we need it. We'll actually change the log later, but it's all right as it is. So we'll save this, and we're actually going to go to set screen, and we're going to set the screen to a new splash screen, and we're going to send it this. And if you're wondering what the this keyword means, because it's something that people that are new to programming or Java may not necessarily understand, but it actually is a reference to this class, so it sends it this instance of Angry Masons. And once we create this, you will see why that it becomes important down the road. It's not necessarily important right now, however, later it will be. So just for now, just keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to right click on screens. I created a new folder. If you right click on that and go to new folder, I left that behind, but call it screens, and then make a new class, and we're going to call it splash screen. Surprise, surprise. And splash screen, because as we saw earlier how game actually controls all of our screens for us, we're going to actually have this implements screen. And we're going to have to import that, and we're going to have to add the unimplemented methods, and we're going to get a bunch of these to-dos. And I really hate that Eclipse does it, and I'm sure there's a way to change it. In fact, I think I've seen it in the settings. But it really, really bugs me, and I just haven't had the time to change the setting for it, assuming that there is a way to change it. But we look and we have all these methods here. We have render, resize, show, hide, pause, resume, and dispose. The ones we're really going to have to worry about are going to be dispose, a show, and render. Resize, not so much, mostly because we aren't going to be changing the size of anything yet. We might implement some kind of full screen thing where we can make our game go full screen. But right now, I'm not all that worried about it. And you shouldn't be either yet. But I went ahead and I made this fancy little splash screen image right here. Woohoo! And to put that into Eclipse, if you just drag and drop it and open up Eclipse, there's going to be an assets folder. If you open up that assets folder and go to, you're going to have a data folder and drop it in there. You copy it, it's already there, but I'll go ahead and override it, and you have that picture in there. And if you open up, say, your Android one and go to assets data and look, lo and behold, that is also there. The LibGDX PNG is the one that we saw displayed earlier for the demo, so we can actually go ahead and delete that. We don't need that, and I'm actually curious to see it does indeed delete it for Android as well. So basically that manages all of our assets for us. But we're going to create something called a texture, and we're going to call this splash texture, and then we're going to need a sprite. We're going to call this splash sprite, and we're going to need a sprite batch, and we'll just call that batch. Simple enough. If you hit Command-Shift-O, all the errors will go away, and we get imports. Imports are going to be, we're going to have a lot of imports in this, because we're going to actually be using, for the first time I've ever used it, is the universal tween engine. And I looked at some code. I got it working the first time after I made really silly mistakes, probably stemming from me being half awake. I don't know if you can tell, but my voice is even getting really raspy. But we will trudge on. We will go on, continue. But I'll try to hit on what each of these are. Basically, a texture is simply an image. So the texture is going to be this. A sprite actually kind of allows us to do a little bit more with that image. It allows us more access to image manipulation, and we're going to use that because we could just straight up display the texture on the screen. But instead of doing that, what I actually want to do is I actually want to make it so that the image kind of fades in and then fades out, and then it goes to the main menu to make it look a little bit more, I don't want to, well, make it more professional, make it look like we know what we're doing, right? Because that's the important part, is that you look like you know what you're doing. And a sprite batch, basically it sends your bound images when you have a texture in OpenGL, you have bindings and stuff like that, and you want to send those in a batch, and it speeds up your game performance tremendously instead of sending everything at separate times. It's a much more kind of technical thing than that, and it's hard to explain in a non-technical way. And I'm assuming if you're watching this, you might not know a whole lot about OpenGL, or you may know a lot. If you know a lot, you already know about batching, because it's one of the first things you learn. And if you don't know a lot, then you might not necessarily be ready to learn all of OpenGL, because heavens knows I don't. And so, but this is a good kind of stepping stool to begin understanding that kind of stuff. So, back to code. We're going to say that the splash texture equals a new texture, and we're going to do it, set up the location, and that is splash screen.png, and that's that actually. And we can set a filter on that if we want, and we're going to do a texture filter dot, what's the one I want to use? Linear. Same for this, texture filter dot linear. That will change how your image is scaled and stuff like that, and linear kind of usually gives it a little bit of a smoother look. Now for our splash sprite equals a new, and I'm going to show you a really cool trick. If you hit Control and Spacebar, or Command and Spacebar, it will actually open up the available methods to you that you're looking at. And this sprite can actually, as a constructor, can take a texture. And that's actually what we're going to use. So we're going to put our splash texture in there, put our colon, and we now have a sprite. As for that splash sprite, we're going to want to we're going to go ahead and set an origin. And I don't know exactly if this works for positioning. We'll see. But splash sprite dot get width is what we want, and divide it by 2, and splash sprite dot get height and divide that by 2, and that should set it basically in the middle. And then splash sprite dot set position GDX dot graphics dot get width and GDX dot graphics dot get height, and that should, in theory, put it in the middle because we're telling the engine to put origin of it. We don't need the F there. We're telling it to put the origin of the image at the center of the image, and then putting the center of the image at the center of our screen. In theory, that's how it should work. In practice, we will see. We're going to need to set the batch to a new sprite batch, and that's just an empty constructor. No worries there. Now for the rendering. GDX.gl. We're going to set the clear color, which is each time we go through a render phase. This render method is actually a loop, and it gets called over and over and over and over, which is what most people would refer to as a game loop. But we're actually going to set this to black, which is going to be 0, 0, 0, and 1. Which, yeah, we'll leave it at that for now. And we're going to set it to GDX GL clear, and that is going to take GL10 point, GL10 point GL underscore color buffer bit. And so here we're actually setting the clear color, and here we're actually doing the clearing. OpenGL works in a way a lot of times where it is state-based, and because of that, you set things at one point, and then you perform the action the next. So we set the clear color, and then we're actually clearing it. Now with batches, we actually have to call begin, and then underneath that, you're going to want to call end, not enable blending, end. And splash sprite, this is where we're going to be doing our drawing, and we're going to set up that batch, that needs to be called. All of our drawing has to be done in between a batch begin and a batch end. You can't call batch begin if it hasn't ended, and you can't call end if you haven't began, and you can't draw if you haven't began. So that makes sense. So all of our drawing has to be done in between there. That is kind of paramount to everything that you may be doing. Make sure that we call super.render. Let's go ahead and save our splash screen. We need to import it here, so Command-Shift-O. Yeah, that's the one we want. And remove, oh, silly us. We need to actually create another variable called Angry Masons game. And then public splash screen, we need to create a constructor that takes Angry Masons game, And if you hit Command Shift O, it'll import that for you, and we'll say this dot game equals game. And if you don't know what this keyword modifier does, if you look, you'll see that these are in blue because they're global variables. And if you click it, you can see that it's actually changing it so that it accesses this game instead of this game right here, which if you highlight over, you see that these are the two that are the games. Without the this, it would actually be referring to that. So this keyword is key. We could just use a different variable name and do it that way, but this is a really commonly used setup, and one that's not too shabby, if I don't say so myself. So let's right click on the desktop, run as a Java application, choose main, save that, and we have nothing. Because we have an error here. It says the constructor is undefined. Public splash screen. And what am I doing here that is not correct? Let's see. Create a constructor. Public? Yeah, yep. We'll just change this to game. But yeah, this should work, and this dot game equals game. That's what we had before, correct? Run as a Java application. Still nada. Alright, let's do a little bit of deduction here. What could it possibly be doing that is not correct? First off, let's make sure that it's actually being drawn. So we're going to do gdx.app.log, and we're going to say angry masons.log. The message is going to be rendering ... that and that. So let's go ahead and run that again. Okay, so render is indeed being called. Oh, I gotta text at 2:30 in the morning. That's nice. Actually, so that's why. Wow. And you guys probably saw me type that and were thinking, what is he thinking? Okay, so no, it still uses this corner here. But we've got it on the screen. And actually, let's just go ahead and just clear that out. Clear out that code. And you'll see it'll look a whole lot better like that as we're testing. Boom! We have a fancy splash screen, only it's not so fancy, right? Not so fancy. So let's go ahead and exit that out and get rid of that. That's unnecessary. And we're going to start the tweening, where we're going to actually get it to fade in. So let's right click here, go to a new class, and call it sprite tween. And we're going to say that it implements tween accessor for a sprite. Command Shift O here. Add the unimplemented methods. Import sprite. And there we have it. Let's clear this out. And this is what we're going, it needs to get the values, and it's giving us an error because we aren't returning anything yet. But we're going to say return values 0. Actually, let's do this the right way. Public static final string, and we're going to call this alpha equals 1. Oh, whoops. That needs to be an int. Final int. And we're going to say we're going to make a case, or not a case, switch, and that switch is going to take tween type, and I never use switch statements. Let me look how they, okay, it does. I never use switch statements, but we're going to say case alpha. I set that up wrong too, didn't I? No, I didn't. Like that. We're going to say return values 0 equals target dot get color dot a, and then return 1. And I believe the 1 is because we're only getting one value here. And then actually let's set this up more nice and neat so it's more readable. Readable code is nice. And then break, and then default is to return 0. Right? Break is the correct thing, right? No, we don't need a break because we're returning right above it. Duh. That was silly. Now to set the values, we're actually going to also use a switch again, this time with the tween type, just as before. And then the case alpha, we are going to say that target dot set color to that, and we're going to set it to 1 1 1, and then new values 0. And then I believe that takes a break as well. That actually does take a break, correct? Yes. And that will should set our stuff up correctly. We'll see how it works. Back to the show method, we're going to set up our tween stuff now. So we're going to do tween dot register accessor, and we're going to set it up for sprite dot class because that's the class we're tweening. The default accessor is going to be a new sprite tween, just like that. Import that. We need a new variable called tween manager. That also needs imported. Goodness gracious, imports for days. And we need to say manager equals new tween manager. And I believe we can now actually set up our tweens. We'll say tween dot what do we want? Tween dot, let's use 2. Tween dot 2, we're going to use our splash sprite. The tween type is going to be sprite tween dot alpha. The duration is going to be 3f. Dot what kind do we want to use? Dot target, I suppose. What actually how does that work? That is the target value, which is going to be 1 dot ease tween equation dot think it's that. Yeah. Dot ease. We'll just say ease in and make it quadratic, I believe. Dot start. And there's our manager. I think that's all we need. And then up here, manager dot update with the delta time. Alright, let's try this out. Make sure, hopefully I didn't forget anything. Oh, I did forget something. My bad. The splash sprite dot set color. We're going to need to go ahead and set that to 1110. That way it starts off transparent. Or, yeah, starts off completely transparent. And boom, we have a fancy looking fade animation. It takes a little bit of a long time. Maybe we change that to 2.5F or maybe even just 2F. But I think that that is everything that I'm actually going to be setting up this time for episode 2. I know it doesn't seem like much, but we basically learned the most important part of a game, and that is how to get something on the screen. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys to death, but let me know if you have any recommendations for the series, anything I can do to help kind of teach you in terms of, help you learn stuff, and because we're learning together, and glad you guys are here to be along for the ride or whatever, But have a good night or morning or whenever you guys are watching this, because I'm gonna go to bed. But I will catch you guys for episode 3. Hopefully that'll be up in another 24 hours, and I'm gonna try to keep up on pace with this. After this, it might take a little bit longer because I really want to look into how to do some of the fancy menu stuff that LibGDX actually gives us. And I think that's going to be episode 3, because I want to actually build up and get something so that you can click start game and the game starts. And that's the most important thing that I'm looking forward to first, is to get the basics out of the way, and then we can actually start working on making a pretty awesome game. So thanks for watching this video, guys. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something. If not, tell me what I can do to help you next time. But see you guys later.